Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a bit of a colder pattern which is going to be taking place in the eastern United States. We might have a bit of a warm-up towards the early part of December, but I'm not expecting that to be too long-lived, especially with what's expected to come after that little warm-up. So we have a lot to talk about in today's video. We're going to be taking a look at the upper air maps and the teleconnections. So again, it's going to be interesting and it is going to be a fun video to make and to enjoy. So let's get right into it, and let's start off with the current weather photo of the day. This one was sent in by Hayden, again from central Idaho. This is a couple photos from a storm that dropped around a foot of snow in his area. And of course, you can see it piling up on not only the trees, but also on the roof of this cabin in, again, central Idaho. So he is a little bit higher up in elevation, and that's why he was able to get some of the snow. He is in the foothills, so again, he's not crazy up in elevation, but it is a little bit higher up there, so that's why he is able to get so much snow, especially during the winter. And again, thank you for Hayden for sending this one in. If you guys have any other photos that you guys want to send in, send them over to my email address, which is elitheweatherguyyt@gmail.com. It's also in the description down below, and then just write a general area for where your photo was taken from. So like Hayden wrote, again, it could just be central Idaho, it could just be a general area. It does not have to be a town name if you don't want to. So again, nothing specific, but just a general area from where you took that photo from. Here's a look at what the current National Weather Service page looks like. Really not a lot going on. We have some red flag warnings up into Montana and California, a few flood watches in southern Texas, but again, a few wind advisories in parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, a couple of winter weather advisories in the eastern UP of Michigan. But again, overall, there's really not a lot going on today in terms of precipitation. We will be dealing with that system moving by that's currently in New England and actually closer to parts of Atlantic Canada right now. That'll be moving by later today, and once that moves by, we're going to see the temperatures really drop in a lot of these areas for the eastern United States, and it'll become much colder, especially compared to what you're dealing with today in most of these spots. Yesterday we had a high temperature of 91 degrees in Santee, California. The low temperature was negative 13 degrees in Peter Sinks, Utah. Highest rainfall report of about 3.34 inches in Stuart, Florida, and the highest snowfall report was 1 mile west-southwest of Eosita, Colorado, where they got 1.8 inches of snowfall yesterday. So again, overall, not too crazy of a day in terms of weather yesterday. Here's a look at the upper air maps, and in the blue and green and purple colors, these are where we're going to have low pressure systems. Typically, these are associated with disturbed weather, so rain, snow, things like that, as well as colder air. And then these yellow and orange blobs, which you're going to see pop up from here, from time and time throughout the slide. Those are indicating the higher pressure. That's where it's going to most likely be warmer, drier, less precipitation, and less weather to talk about in those areas, and these are really going to move out within a couple of days. So what I'm expecting the pattern to be like is for us to have a few low pressure centers like we see on the map right now, and then we might have one high pressure center right in the middle of both of these, which could provide some warming up for maybe just 1 or 2 days before one of these systems ends up moving into those areas. So once the system moves into that area, it'll cool down once again for maybe 4 or 5 days at a time before finally warming up again. And the only time where that might break apart, where you might see a continual or sustained amount of warm air, is probably going to be for early December, probably between the 1st and about the 10th. That could be a fairly mild period before we go back into a bit of a chillier period, and that would line up right in time for Christmas, Hanukkah, all of that. So it probably will be a little bit on the colder side, or at least from what I'm seeing right now, for those holidays, which I know for a lot of you guys, you are going to like that, but for some of you who don't like the cold and snow, that's not going to be the best news for you guys. Now, this is for Tuesday, and you can see that we have low pressure up into the northwest as well as for the east coast. But while most of you guys are going to be paying attention to the United States and really just focusing on the lower 48, it is important to look at what's happening up in Canada, and once you get especially up into central and northern Canada, because that's where your cold air is coming from. Your cold air is not originating over the western United States and then moving into the east coast area. It's starting up into parts of British Columbia, Alberta, and some of the territories up in northern Canada, and then drifting down into the northwest, the northern plains, and then into the northeast. And that's generally how your cold air is going to move. So this is not going to be one of those patterns where it's moving pretty much east to west. We will have some lateral movement, but we will also have some vertical movement where we're going to have these storms coming in from parts of Canada and diving down into the United States, which is going to contribute to such a overwhelmingly cold pattern, at least for the next week or two. Here would be for Wednesday, and you can see that we have colder air into the central and western United States. We have a little bit of a milder pattern setting up for tomorrow, Wednesday, and also for Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving, it'll turn a bit colder. So here's Thanksgiving itself. We might have some rain to deal with, maybe even some snow into some parts of the Great Lakes and the central United States. We will have warmer temperatures up into the west as well as along the east coast. So looking mild over those areas. It will still be somewhat chilly because, again, we are now into late November. So what we consider to be warm, you know, if you were to say this maybe just 2 months ago in late September and you would have said, wow, it's really warm today, it's 50 degrees, people would have looked at you a little bit funny because, again, back in September, we would have thought, well, that's not really that warm. But now that we've gotten used to a little bit more of the colder temperatures, 50 degrees is going to feel pretty nice over a lot of areas. Even if it only gets up into the 40s, it's still not going to be that cold. So again, it's not going to be super chilly for Thanksgiving. The only weather concern that I really have is for this storm up in Wisconsin and some of the surrounding areas. We're going to have to talk about that in another video because we could have some implications with rain and snow. And of course, anytime that you have rain and snow in the forecast on Thanksgiving or the couple days before or after, of course, that's going to get some more extra attention just because it is one of the busiest travel days and time periods of the year. Moving this on to November 26th, which is Friday of this week, you can see that we have colder temperatures lingering on into the east. So you have a really deep trough into the eastern United States. And so even though, again, you see some of these areas up into North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, it looks like they're in that warmer shade or the high pressure area. If you look at where the cold air is coming from, if you follow these lines, the wind flow would be out of the northwest because we know that wind travels, or anything really weather related, travels from west to east, at least at this latitude. So we're going to be dealing with actually maybe chillier than normal temperatures into these areas just because you will have that air coming in from the northwest. So you not only have to look at the temperature pattern, but you also have to look at where the winds are coming from and then also the upper air maps, vice versa as well. So an example of that would be in New England. You see that this entire area is under that green shade, indicating that it is going to be under low pressure. But if you were to look up near Maine or even some parts of coastal New England, it would actually be warmer than normal in these areas because you're getting a brisk southwesterly breeze coming in off the ocean, which could provide some somewhat mild air into those areas. So we will have to take a look at the wind flow because that is going to be important into the temperature pattern as well. Here's for Saturday, Sunday, and you can see that it really just sticks into the eastern United States. But while it's staying cold in the east, we're seeing this warmer air building up into the west. So we will have some relief from the cold air right around when it switches from November to December. So this is around the 29th. Still cold if you live pretty much from anywhere Michigan on eastward. It will be still in the colder pattern, but anywhere west of there and you'll be somewhat milder. If we move this on to Tuesday, again, still this would be Tuesday of the following week, so this is November 30th. And you can see still cold if you live in the Northeast, but pretty much everywhere else, looking at a somewhat colder pattern. And then even if we look at this for December 1st, it is still colder into the Great Lakes and the Northeast, and that might linger on for a little bit longer. I don't know how sustainable that is, but it does look like it at least warms up a little bit into the central United States. Don't lose hope, though, if you do like cold and snow, because you can see that we're kind of reloading for another wave of colder air once this batch of low pressure moves to the east, and once that starts to kind of disrupt everything. But just because of how wide this high pressure system is, it is going to take a while to get through these areas. So it's basically stretching from Oregon all the way to Wisconsin in terms of how wide this high pressure center is. So it is going to take probably 5 days or 6 days to get out from underneath this high pressure center, even if it is moving, because again, if the high pressure center is moving east to west, you are maybe still going to be under that that high pressure dome for 5, 6, 7 days before it's fully out of there, and once you finally get into another batch of colder air. So it is going to take a while to remove that high pressure system, but once it's gone, it's going to take a while to rebuild again, meaning that you might have a little period where it does get colder and potentially snowier in a lot of these spots. Here's the reason why that's happening. This is the Arctic Oscillation, which basically tracks the Arctic Circle, and it tracks again the polar vortex as well. So a lot of people like to throw out the word polar vortex without really understanding what it is. It's all it is really. It's just a big blob of air over the polar regions that sometimes during the winter comes down into the United States and southern Canada, and that's when everything in the news explodes, where negative 20 degrees and all of those stories get printed out about the colder temperatures, and they all use the word polar vortex or Arctic blast or anything like that. And that's all it really is. It's really just tracking that air mass, which at times is actually not super cold relative to that area, because it does warm up, it does cool down in those areas, just like it does in the United States, although it's just happening at a much colder temperature. So if this Arctic oscillation is above normal, what that would mean is that you probably have a more of a blocky pattern where it's harder for things to move around, meaning that you have more of that cold air, or relatively cold air for us, even if it is above average in the polar regions for that week or that month. It can still feel very, very cold if you were to translate those temperatures down to the United States. So if you take negative 30 degrees, and I'm not sure what the averages up in the Arctic Circle are, but if you were to take negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm sure that's actually fairly close to their average during the middle of the winter. But if you were to take that and then put it all the way down into the United States, again, that would be a bigger news story. It's not a big news story if somewhere in Greenland gets down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. That happens almost every day in the winter, but it is a bigger news story if it happens in the United States, and that's because that same air mass is making its way so far to the south, and that's what is unusual about those type of events. So having this at a positive stage later on in the period, again, you can see that it happens right around the 30th to the 1st of December. So right around the turn of the month, we're going to see that rise above the neutral line and move a little bit positive. Now, this is not sustainable. Again, we see these little fluctuations. You actually saw about a 1 week time period between about the 14th and I would say the 20th or 21st, where it was a little bit positive. Then it went back down to negative between about the 20th and what's expected to be right around the 30th, so that's about 10 days of colder air, and then you go back to positive for probably another 7 to 10 days. This is going to move around a lot, and this just goes to show you how up and down our patterns in the United States and Canada tend to be. Here's the North Atlantic Oscillation. You want this to be negative, although again, this does look like it's going back into the positive phase, which for the next week or so through Thanksgiving and through a couple days after that, it will be in the negative phase, indicating usually colder temperatures, especially for the Northeast and the Great Lakes. It is going to stay positive until about the 30th and then rise above and go above normal again Now, again, same thing that happened with the Arctic Oscillation. This was positive just a few days ago between about the 15th and I would say the 20th, where it was for 5 days positive, then it went back down slightly negative, and now it's going back positive again. I'm assuming that, again, this is not going to stick around for a long time unless this gets really amplified and starts moving up near 3-4 standard deviations above the mean. But as long as it's staying right within 2 standard deviations of the mean either way, I don't think this is going to be something that lasts over a week or two in either direction, in either the negative or the positive direction. And this is one of the more important things in terms of our pattern, the PNA. A lot of people focus on the NAO and the AO, which are both very important to look at, but a lot of people neglect what's happening out in the Pacific because they think about their area and they think about, if for example, if you live in the eastern United States, you would think that you would be closer to the Arctic Circle and the North Atlantic, and therefore you would probably look at those features a little bit more than, let's say, if you were in the Pacific Northwest, because of course you live closer to the Pacific and you would probably look at the PNA a little bit more. But it's probably a little bit reverse. You want to look at more of the Pacific models if you are living in the eastern or central United States, just because everything moves from west to east. So whatever's happening in the Pacific is eventually going to translate into some sort of change in the United States. So if we have a big storm out near Alaska, there's a fairly good shot that that moves either into western Canada or maybe drops down into the northwest, and then that's going to have a downstream effect on everywhere else in the North American continent. So this is a really important oscillation to look at, and you can see that right now it is positive, which is good if you like cold and snow, because that means it's usually warmer in the west, and when it's warmer in the west, fairly good shot that it's actually colder in the east. But you can see that same thing happening a little bit delayed, but right around the 1st of December, it goes right back down, and then by about the 2nd or the 3rd, it's going to go negative according to these models. And again, same thing with this PNA. You can see that just a few days ago, it was actually in the negative phase, and we're looking at as soon as this weekend, and also near, I think, Thursday and Fridays when this went back positive. So really not too long ago when this was back in the negative phase, which would usually indicate that it's warmer in the eastern United States, and now it's going back positive, and then eventually it'll go back to negative, and we're going to see this switching on and off. So just because you see that 1 week it's expected to be a negative PNA or a positive NAO or a positive AO, again, that just means that that week or that week or two will probably be on the warmer side or on the colder side, but it can work either way. And again, these things are going to change quite a bit. They change pretty much week to week, day to day. So we're not going to see this kind of stay in place. And even when you are in a warmer pattern, it's not going to stay that way the entire time. Like we saw in the colder pattern, which we're currently going through and which will continue for another couple days, that goes and changes around. Every few days you do get some warmer air. Today's one of those days in the eastern half of the country, or the eastern third of the country, where it's a little bit warmer and milder, and then by Thanksgiving and the day after, it'll start to turn a little bit colder. So we are going to continue to track these storms and this pattern for you guys. I will probably be uploading on that storm up in Wisconsin and Illinois for the next couple of days, just because it will have implications on the Thanksgiving travel forecast, and I do want to make sure that all of you guys are updated on that. And I will upload on that only if it is still being shown in the model. So if we're looking at tomorrow afternoon, it's still being shown. A lot of models are still agreeing that there could be some rain or snow implications for that area. Then of course I'll upload a video on that, and I might even have a snowfall forecast out by then, or it would either be tomorrow or the day after when I would have that snowfall forecast up. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.